Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the time you're giving our students, and I'm going to give you the mic.
Great, thank you. All right, so I am going to share my screen partially because it helps keep me on track with what I want to talk about. And then also, I think it helps different learners sometimes to see what I'm actually talking about. All right, so just an introduction. I am Amy King, and I am the director for the Office of Accessible Education here at Loyola University, New Orleans. And so a lot of times students will wonder, like, what exactly is it that we do? And why do we do it? And so we serve our students who have a disability. And so we have a legal definition of disability, which I have put up here. And, I'm not thrilled with the language, but it's a federal law and there's nothing I can do about the language. So here we are. But they refer to a disability as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more major life activities. And that seems so vague, right? What does that actually mean for me or for, another student? Um, and I get a lot of questions when we're doing presentations or even tabling events around campus sometimes of like, well, I have this, and I'll use ADHD for an example, but that's not a disability, right? Well, it falls under this definition because it can substantially limit one or more major life activities. So thinking of a student with ADHD, it interferes with their attention. It interferes with their focus, and those are major life activities. And then it has a trickle down effect on functioning in a classroom. And that's kind of where we kick in. Our services can kick in. And then think about almost any diagnosis a person can have can rise to the level of a disability. We work with some students, for example, who are diabetics. Some diabetics are perfectly maintained and they don't have vision issues. They don't have neuropathy in their hands or feet. And at that moment, they may not need accommodation. But if that changes, they might very well. So it can fluctuate and it can change over time. We can acquire a disability at any point in our lives, unlike some other federally protected statuses. Today I might not have a disability. Tonight something could happen, and tomorrow I could. So things change. And so it doesn't have to be that you've had this forever, it could be something new. And so, what is our role in all of this? And I really kind of start with um, the basics and kind of the legal compliance first. And so, we really have to understand the disability laws, um, the institutional regulations, and what we outline as an institution too for the university's communicated rights and responsibilities for students and the university's rights and responsibilities to our students. We work on behalf of the university to keep the institution in compliance with these federal laws. Um, we engage in what we call the interactive process to determine reasonable accommodations. And that process I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail in a minute. We approve and assist with academic and other accommodations. And those other accommodations for some students could mean access to residential life using campus facilities, including our dining services. And then for some students, we actually provide direct accommodations, hands-on work with those students. What does this mean then for a student, right? So we're doing all this compliance and we're keeping the university out of trouble, so to speak. And we're often thought of as an advocacy unit. And we are, because we're keeping the university in compliance, but sometimes we really have to kind of nudge and push, sometimes shove faculty and other offices to implement the accommodations. So that's kind of where the advocacy role comes in as well. And so to kick off our process, we have documentation requirements. And what almost every office like this has done over the years is created a form that will simplify the gathering of information, but that doesn't mean we won't accept other information. Or if the doctor, and a lot of times the doctor, whatever they may be, psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever, they're like, oh, I don't like filling out forms, and that's okay. But it's a general guide to kind of what we're looking for. And so we want to identify that it was an appropriately licensed professional who is giving the documentation. And what that means is, for example, an eye doctor cannot say that I have ADHD. Two different types of practice, and that's out of their scope of practice. We also do not accept documentation from parents or family members, just because there is some conflict there, and that's also conflict professionally. What we hope the documentation has is a little bit of a description of how the student is impacted by their diagnosis or disability or whatever has brought them to our office. And that's kind of where we term functional limitations. So how does it limit a student from participating fully and equally in a classroom, on campus, in a res hall? So we're looking for that relationship between what's going on with the student because of their disability or diagnosis and how it's creating some barriers, maybe to access to information or facilities, barriers to attending and focusing during class and things like that. Sometimes we want to know information about, is this variable? So some diagnoses kind of fluctuate, and that can also help us in more what I think of as the advocacy role. So thinking of something like that, maybe a student who has Crohn's disease, and they can be well maintained. And I can speak to this a little bit because my brother has it. Things are going great, great, great. And then unexpectedly, there are some diagnoses that there's no warning signs, in essence, that a flare up's going to happen. And then bam, things are not great. And it could be a day, it could be a couple of days. And so if there is that fluctuation, that helps us determine some possible other accommodations, but also allows us in a place to where if we need to work with faculty specifically for some flexibility, we don't necessarily disclose, but we have a better idea and picture of what might be going on with the student. And then if the student has used accommodations in the past, it's helpful for us to know about that, and helpful to know up front. But I'm going to speak to why we don't always need this information necessarily on a piece of paper or up front. But having that information, gives us a good starting point in our conversation with the student, and a better idea of how those accommodations might fit. So sometimes for students who have had accommodations from anywhere from kindergarten through 12th grade, anywhere along that time frame, some of those accommodations that the student may have used, sometimes may have used frequently, or may have never used, but they're still on their list, aren't applicable in the college setting. And so knowing that kind of prepares us then for having those conversations with students. And I talk about this documentation. And so, because the laws say, one, we need to verify that the person is a person with a disability. There used to be really stringent documentation guidelines, and they're less stringent, so to speak, now. Getting documentation for a lot of students can be a barrier. I've had with the form that we developed, students who are like, my doctor's going to charge me a $50 copay just to fill out the form. Well, that stinks. And I can think back to when I was an undergrad student and a graduate student. $50 is a lot. $50 is a lot of money right now, just to get a piece of paper filled out. We've had students, local students especially, who have been impacted by hurricanes and flooding events. All of my files were destroyed. So we have as much flexibility as we can in what we will take it as documentation. And sometimes simply, and more and more physicians and hospitals or whatever are using those patient portals, and you can access them online or on your phone. Um, and if a student can provide like the visit summary that says, I diagnosed the student with X, Y, and Z today, and you can see the student's name, we can see the doctor's name, that's our kicking off point. So we will accept that. So this idea that there has to be these huge evaluations, and sometimes we might look for that, isn't necessarily true. If you had accommodations, let's say in 7th grade, and then you really just kind of stopped using them because the school you went to was really flexible or whatever it might be, we might still look at that documentation from 7th grade, because in all likelihood, when we think of things like learning disabilities or ADHD, they don't go away. Like talking about Crohn's disease earlier, you might manage it. It's never going to go away. So if you were diagnosed with, one of those things, that's our kicking off point, because I talked about that interactive process. That's where we sit down with you, the student, and talk about, okay, so this is what, you've got ADHD. So tell me, like, describe what it's like sitting through a 3-hour class. And that's how we get the information so we can best design the accommodations. And so just some examples of academic accommodations, and these are examples, it's not an exhaustive list. It's close to an exhaustive list, but not. And they apply a little bit differently in the online setting. But for some students are just going to do better typing notes rather than handwriting. And it could be for multiple different reasons. We also have, and we say the computer use, because sometimes students will have such difficulty in taking notes for themselves that we want to supplement their notes with technology. And technology is fantastic these days. It used to be that some of our adaptive or assistive technology was $3,000 to $5,000 per license. And things are so much more accessible now. And so one of those that we use is actually called Glean. And Glean can be used in both the online setting and in-person setting. And it records the lecture. As it's recording, a student can tag portions of the lecture. And I like to be brutally honest with students and say, we've all had that moment, and I'm going to own it myself, where you're sitting in class, you think you're super prepared, the professor's lecturing, and you're like, what are they talking about? And you're like, hey, what do I do here? I don't even know the word they're saying. So as an example, if you were using Glean, then you could tag the recording at that point and go back and just listen to that again. So you don't have to listen to the whole thing over, because sometimes, listening and attending is part of the difficulty the student faces. The really cool thing and the more recent development from Glean is that Glean then captures that recording and transcribes it to a set of lecture notes. Now, of course, if there's tangents during the class, like, hey, did you catch that great Mardi Gras parade the other night? And you have a little class discussion about that, that's going to be in the transcript. But students can edit that out. And it's really helpful. And the technology has been successful, with students who don't have an ability to write or have a limited ability to write, with our students who are deaf or hard of hearing, for our students with learning disabilities, and then our students with ADHD who have difficulty attending. And those are just some of the applications. Preferential seating, and again, this applies really for in-person classes, recording a recording device, and that could be Glean, or that could be just using a plain old recorder. These things do a great job of recording too. And sometimes students really do want to listen to lectures over if that's how they learn better. Providing a distraction-reduced testing environment, extended time for testing. And then what we term is consideration for disability-related absences or consideration for due date extensions. And that absences, I'm going to loop back to talking about some of our students who have diagnoses or health conditions that can be unpredictable. Realizing attendance and participation for the most part, is pretty core to our learning objectives for the majority of our courses. And we have attendance policies and participation policies. But there are sometimes, through no control of the student, they are just unable to attend class. And so we ask for faculty to grant students some leniency there. And that can overflow to the consideration for due date extensions as well. If I am laid up in bed, it's going to be pretty difficult for me to work on an assignment. And with those latter two accommodations in particular, and I keep using this interactive process language, is sometimes where we have to loop back to the faculty member and get information about the design of the course, the design of the assignments, to see if that really is a reasonable accommodation. Sometimes courses are so participatory in nature that the absences really are going to have an impact. And due date extensions, where we navigate that is, and again, I'm gonna pick on my brother and his Crohn's disease, right? When you have a Crohn's flare up, what does that, look like in terms of like how long you're going to be impacted before you can like go back to class, go back to work? And then that helps us determine a reasonableness of a possible extension on an assignment. Now, if the assignment was assigned day one and it's due the last day of class, there are 8 weeks plus, depending upon the format of the course, to begin the work on that project. So reasonably, when we're looking at assignments like that, barring some major intervening episode, students should have been working on the assignment all along. Queen of procrastination. I realize that other students are that way too, but realistically, we're not talking, a month, a week extension, always a matter of days. Sometimes it's a matter of, it was due in class this morning, I'll give you till midnight tonight, depending upon the assignment and kind of the conversation our office has had with the faculty member. And so in general, this is kind of the flow of our accommodation process. So we get some sort of documentation from the student, we look it over, and then one of our team members reaches out to get an appointment scheduled with the student. Sometimes the student is really on the ball and does that ahead of time, which is fantastic. And we have phone appointments, which are not my preference. Zoom appointments and in-person appointments. So we try to meet people wherever they might need. We have that conversation with the student about accommodations. And then sometimes we kind of have to pause our determination because we have to have that interaction with faculty. And then we approve the reasonable accommodations. And then the student actually is involved in the process at this point, where they use our online system to deliver accommodation letters to faculty. Faculty get the letter, they read it over. If they have any questions, we ask that they reach out, and otherwise they approve the accommodations, and then the accommodations are implemented. Since I have taken over this office, so I have been here a year and 2 months now. One of the things I really strived to do was make our website a little bit more user-friendly. Kind of lump things by like, this is what I'm looking for. If I'm a prospective student, if I'm a returning student, if I'm a parent and I have questions. And so part of that too was revising our handbook, which kind of has all of the policies, procedures. This is, your responsibilities and our grievance process. So I really took a lot of time over the summer, and especially with that handbook, reorganized it and put it in logical sense. So it's a great resource if you want a deep dive on information. If students don't need a deep dive, our general website is a good resource. Otherwise, just shoot us an email and get something set up with us as well for questions, queries. What could what kind of accommodations might I be able to have? And then normally I keep it open for questions. But since we're recording this for future viewing, I will share with you our office and our team members. So you have first me, the director, and we have designated accessibility coordinators. So Rowan in our office takes the alphabet, and that's the simplest way for us to break things down right now. She takes A through K. While we're in the hiring process for another accessibility coordinator, I take the end of the alphabet and all of our College of Law students. Amanda Zapp is our testing coordinator, and we have two fantastic graduate assistants in our office. Truth be told, some days they're doing all the dirty work and getting it all done, right? And then we also have Julia Miller, who is our faculty liaison. And Julia plays a really big role, sometimes working with us and faculty. I have never been a faculty member, and I don't speak faculty language, and sometimes it's a lot different. I also don't, what do I understand learning objectives and things like that for courses? Sure, but I've never done a deep dive because, again, I'm not a faculty member. So Julia helps us navigate some of those conversations and concerns with faculty, and then she's been a great consultant in our revision of our information. And that is everything I have for you today. I encourage you, if you have questions, if this is what's going on with me, could I get accommodations? Definitely reach out. It's fantastic to have the conversation. And even if it's not an accommodation, we might be able to refer you to some resources maybe that you've never thought about before. We'll obviously refer you back to your faculty, and your faculty are, always a good first point of contact when you're struggling with anything. But we're here to support students in the most robust and comprehensive way. And sometimes that simply means tagging in other offices and departments. So we're here to help, and we look forward to hearing from you.
I do have a question thinking about, some scenarios I've experienced supporting students where, for example, I had a student had a car accident and broken arm, and it was their dominant. So obviously, typing was not an option. So when a student has something that maybe it's a temporary, situation, but they will need some level of accommodation. Um, y'all are able to assist in those moments as well?
Yeah, definitely. And it has been my experience all of these years that nobody, except for me, honestly, breaks their non-dominant hand or arm. It's always the dominant. And it makes sense. You're falling, you go, I
Yeah.
don't know what I did. I fell, I did the non-dominant. Yeah, so there's software that can help with that. That would allow a student to dictate their answers. Now it's kind of a pain, just truth be told, because like punctuation, capitalization,
Of course.
right. And then, oftentimes it's just working with the faculty to say, what is the format of the test? Like, how can we best assist the student? Could we postpone it, for a week or so? Because, sometimes when you have a cast, and again, I can speak from experience, like my fingers were swollen up like, giant old sausages
Yeah.
too, in all of the process. And so the thought of typing, I mean, it hurt. It hurt to like
Yeah.
touch something, but the next week or a couple of days later, it was even better. And I was able to type, so what can we navigate with this?
And
Um,
yeah, and resources too, I guess things like being able to, help a student have those conversations
yeah.
because 8-week sessions do go by so quickly.
Oh my goodness, so
So,
quickly. Yes,
if something occurs within that time frame, and it does happen, I mean, everyone's
it
living
does.
life, right? So
Right.
that's great to know too, thinking about those
Absolutely.
temporary scenarios.
Yeah, and it's so interesting in this work. There's some offices who are like, nope, we don't help temporary because it's not a disability because it's like going to go away.
Yeah.
Um, like, okay, but in that moment, I mean, it just seems
Yeah.
kind of cruddy to not do it. And sometimes faculty are like, whatever, like I'll work with the student, like we'll talk over Zoom and do the test, but I think, having those conversations of like, you know, this is a
I,
fast-paced course. How can we best,
yeah.
knock this out? Absolutely. No, we're happy. We're happy to help in that process as well.
Thanks. I think that's a really useful, piece of information, both from my end, I think anyone that works with our online students, but especially for students when, you're reviewing this, think about that because there are times when things come up. And that's great to know y'all are a resource in that moment.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
We really appreciate the time you gave us today and all of the wonderful information. And I think it's going to be just really great for students to be able to revisit this when and if they need it. So thank you again. You are much appreciated, Amy, and the OAE is wonderfully appreciated because I know
Thank
from
you.
personal experience, yeah, when I connect students with you guys, it's always been a very easy, smooth process. So thanks for that.
Fantastic. Well, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
I appreciate the feedback. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You bet.
Shakayla, is there anything from your end that you want to contribute before we stop recording?
No, I just want to say, of course, thank you to Amy for having the time and giving us such a great presentation and allowing our students to have this information for future reference as well. Also really helped hearing it myself just because I know I'm on campus, but I still would, of course, have a lot of different opportunities for needing accommodation or just like temporary things coming up. I like the option and like knowing that we have that resource. And so I really appreciate you guys taking the time. Thank you so much.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. Is there anything you want, to wrap up with, Amy?
I think just kind of I don't know. I'm going to say it's one takeaway, but it probably is one with like multifacets. Um, to our students is keep the lines of communication open. All faculty have the information about, requesting accommodations on their syllabus, and we're busy and time is flying by, and I get that that gets overlooked. Having a conversation with your faculty member, might lead to a referral to our office or might lead to them working directly with you, reaching out to other parties on campus for assistance. Use the tools, use all of the tools that we have for you, but don't hesitate, to reach out directly to our office if you have a question. I use that example early on, like I have ADHD, does that count? Ask those questions of us by email, meet with us, we're happy to help.
Thank you so much. And I really, really appreciate the point of, engaging directly with faculty because I think sometimes for our online students, not having face-to-face interactions, that reminder is necessary, because your professor can feel very distant when you don't have that. But at the end of the day, that's going to be a great resource. And like you said, you may be able to work directly with your instructor. So thanks for pointing that out.
Absolutely.
Well, I am going to stop our recording, guys. Let's see.